The world had plunged into a darkness of no return. Violence was not just an isolated act, but the essence of humanity spreading like a plague. Selfishness and depravity reigned, transforming cities into stages of injustice and chaos. Noah, a man of pure heart, observed everything with weary eyes but without allowing corruption to touch him. He was a simple man, a tireless worker who lived for his family and for the voice that echoed within him. While his neighbors gave in to wickedness, Noah stood firm, sustained by a faith that seemed absurd to those around him. He knew the storm was coming, and he knew he had to prepare. When God spoke, there was no doubt. The order was clear. Build an ark, a colossal refuge that would save not only his family, but every creature that still had a purpose in the world. Noah did not question it. He picked up his tools and began his work, each blow of the hammer an act of obedience, each piece of wood a silent cry against the disbelief of those who laughed at him. Time passed, and the mocking looks of his neighbors became routine. To them, Noah was nothing more than a madman wasting his days in meaningless daydreaming. But he persisted, for he knew that when the first drop fell, the laughter would turn to screams. The days passed and Noah continued to build. The sun beat down on his skin, fatigue weighed on his shoulders, but he did not stop. The sound of the hammer echoed through the village, mixed with the laughter and insults of those who refused to understand. "Where is this rain that never comes, Noah?" some shouted, while others just shook their heads, certain that his madness would never end. He did not answer. He just worked. Each log he lifted was a reminder of his mission. He saw the looks on his children's faces, sometimes questioning, sometimes fearful. He knew that they also doubted, that they wondered if they were following a man who had lost his mind. But deep down, they trusted him. Noah had never done wrong to his family, and he would not do wrong now. Then something changed. At first it was just a different wind, an unnatural silence that hung over the land. Then the first signs came. Animals began to arrive, not guided by men but by an invisible call. Lions walked alongside lambs, eagles flew low without preying on the small rodents that crawled on the ground. This made the most skeptical hesitate. No one understood. Men who had previously scoffed began to watch with suspicion. "This can't be real," they murmured. But it was. They saw it with their own eyes, but still denied it. The human heart is a master at ignoring the inevitable. Noah, however, simply looked up to the sky. He knew the time had come. When the first thunder rumbled across the sky, it was like an ancient roar awakening the earth. People looked at each other, some laughing nervously, others starting to feel a chill down their spines. The rain came, but not as a passing drizzle or an ordinary storm. The drops were heavy, cold, carrying a weight that no one could explain. At first, they tried to ignore it. "It's just a heavy rain," they said, forcing smiles. But then came the flood. The streams overflowed in minutes, streets turned into violent rapids, and the water rose with a speed that none of them could have predicted. Despair spread like wildfire. What had once been certainty turned to panic. Men and women ran to the ark, now seeing not a delusion, but their only hope. But the door was closed, not by Noah, but by a greater force, sealed like a final verdict. Inside, Noah and his family could hear the screams, desperate punches against the wood, cries, pleas, voices begging to be let in, the sound of belated repentance. Noah closed his eyes, holding his wife's hand tightly. His children were huddled together, silent, feeling the weight of that moment. Outside, the world they knew was falling apart. The rain became an uncontrollable flood, sweeping away houses, uprooting trees, swallowing everything without distinction. Those who had laughed before now screamed. Those who thought themselves invincible were carried away by the current like aimless leaves. And Noah, even knowing that he had fulfilled his mission, felt the weight of that tragedy in his chest. Inside the ark, time seemed to stretch strangely. The roar of the waters outside was incessant, a constant reminder of the devastation occurring beyond the wooden walls. The rocking of the ship was intense in the first few days, tossing them from side to side, while thunder still tore through the sky. But gradually the storm subsided, and only the silent expanse remained. The world had disappeared beneath an endless ocean. Noah looked at his sons, who tried to maintain their routine in the cramped corridors of the ark. They fed the animals, cleaned the compartments, talked in low voices. But no one spoke of what they had lost. The village, the neighbors, the childhood friends. Everything was gone. In the silence of the night, Noah wondered about the future. What would life be like after the flood? How would they start over from scratch in a land where everything had been wiped out? There was an inevitable sadness in his chest, but also a certainty. If God had preserved them, it was because there was still a purpose. Noah clung to this idea, keeping his faith like a beacon in the darkness. One morning, he went up to the deck and looked out into the vast blue. No land in sight, no sign that the world would ever be the same again. It was then that he decided to send the raven. The bird flew, circling across the grey sky until it disappeared over the horizon. Noah waited, but the raven did not return. Days passed, and the ark continued to drift over an endless ocean. The silence was thick, interrupted only by the sounds of animals and the rustling of water against wood. The raven had not returned, and Noah felt that his search was not yet over. So he sent a dove. The small bird flew over the water, disappearing on the horizon like a thread of hope loose in the unknown. Noah waited. Hours passed. His heart weighed heavily. Perhaps there was still no solid ground. Perhaps they were doomed to float forever. But then, at dusk, the dove returned, and in its beak a small olive branch. It was a sign, fragile but powerful. Life resisted. The news spread throughout the ark, and a breath of relief filled the air. His children smiled for the first time in a long time. His wife closed her eyes, holding the branch gently, as if she were holding her own future in her hands. Noah looked up at the sky, taking a deep breath. The wait was coming to an end, but the final test was yet to come. He waited another 7 days and sent out the dove again. This time it did not return. The earth was dry enough to receive it. Noah's heart beat faster. God had fulfilled his promise. The time of exile under the waters was ending, and soon they would step onto land again, beginning a new chapter. For humanity, when the ark finally touched dry ground, Noah and his family felt the weight of a new beginning. The smell of the earth, the sight of the trees, the sound of the wind rustling the leaves. Everything was new. The devastation they had witnessed in the past weeks seemed distant, like a nightmare fading away. Noah looked at his sons and his wife, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. They were alive, yes, but what would the future hold? How could humanity rebuild from nothing? How could they bring back what had been lost? But the answer was right there, right in front of him. God's promise was sealed, and the covenant he had made with humanity was written in the sky, with the rainbow shining in the clouds. It was at that moment that Noah understood that the flood was not just a punishment, but an opportunity, a chance to start over, to learn from the mistakes of the past and build a new path. He knelt before the ark, his face wet with tears and the soft rain that fell, and gave thanks, not for the destruction, but for the opportunity to redeem himself. And then, with renewed faith, Noah got up and did what he knew was right. He and his family began to sow again. They planted seeds, cultivated the land, and rebuilt their lives, knowing that the future was in their hands. But there was a doubt that remained. Like a shadow, would man learn from the past? Or as before, would he give in to greed and violence again? Time passed, and the world began to rise from the ashes. Noah and his family built a new life, but the fear that history would repeat itself never completely left them. They knew that humanity needed a new direction, and they hoped that by teaching their children and grandchildren, something would change in people's hearts. But doubt still lingered over Noah. He saw the rainbow in the sky, God's promise that destruction would not be repeated, but he also saw human behavior, which, no matter how hard it tried to redeem itself, seemed to be heading toward the same darkness as before. What would happen now? Was there hope for humanity, or were they just postponing the inevitable? Noah often reflected on what he had learned. The flood had not been just about the waters that would cover the earth. It was about the human capacity to change, to learn from its mistakes. But he wondered, would it be enough? He knew that his mission had not ended with the end of the waters, but had only just begun. It was his responsibility, and that of his family, to cultivate what was left, to teach future generations how to avoid the abyss toward which humanity seemed always to be heading. And so Noah, with the weight of the past on his shoulders, looked to the future with the hope, however faint, that perhaps someday humanity would truly learn its lesson. The rainbow continued to shine in the sky, a reminder of the divine covenant, but also a symbol of the fragility of human hope. Noah, now older, looked at his sons and grandsons with a mixture of pride and concern. He knew that the responsibility for change still lay in everyone's hands, not just his. The lesson of the flood, though immense, was not guaranteed. The future of humanity would depend on the choices of each generation. Noah had done his part. He had built the ark and preserved life, but now the task of maintaining that balance was beyond his hands. He felt that perhaps the greatest challenge was not the storm that had passed, but the storm that still inhabited the human heart. And with that, looking to the horizon, Noah handed down the legacy of hope to those who one day would have the chance to learn what he had learned, that even in the worst tragedies, there can be a new beginning.